I picked up a box of Lipton lemon green tea off the shelf this week. The same yellow box that sits in nearly every grocery aisle in this country. And I turned it over before I ever put it in my cart. 4 ingredients on that label. One of them tells you almost nothing at all. Stay with me, because by the end, I am going to tell you the one tea in this comparison that earned a permanent spot in my own cupboard. Which one of these do you buy without even looking at the box? Lipton, Bigelow, Twinings, or Celestial Seasonings? Tell me in the comments before you watch the rest of this, because I want to see how many of you already guessed the one that surprised me. Tea feels like the safest aisle in the store. No one stands in front of the tea shelf worrying the way they might in front of the cereal or the frozen dinners. It looks like dried leaves in a paper bag. And for the plainest teas, that is close to true. But the moment a box says peach, or vanilla, or wellness, or calm, the ingredient list stops being one word and starts being a small paragraph. I learned to judge food before I learned to judge anything else. That part of me never left. And it is exactly why I stopped trusting the front of the box a long time ago. Growing up, tea was not a category with 4 competing brands lined up on a shelf. It was one tin, refilled when it ran low, and nobody asked what was inside because everybody already knew. The first time I stood in an actual grocery store as an adult and saw an entire aisle devoted to tea, dozens of boxes and dozens of flavours, I remember thinking that so much choice must mean so much more honesty about what was in each one. That turned out to be exactly backwards. More boxes did not mean more clarity. It meant more room for a phrase like natural flavour to hide in plain sight, box after box, without anyone stopping to ask what it actually meant. Lipton lemon green tea is where I want to start, because it is one of the 2 brands that most of you named in the comments before I even asked. This is what the ingredient list shows. Green tea, white hibiscus, natural flavour, and lemon peel. 4 words and only 2 of them are doing the job the name of the tea promises. The hibiscus is not there for the lemon taste. Hibiscus is a colour ingredient as much as anything, the way it tints the liquid a deeper red before it ever reaches your cup. The actual lemon character comes almost entirely from that 3rd word, natural flavour, a phrase that legally covers a wide range of derived compounds and tells you nothing about which ones. Read that again. Green tea, white hibiscus, natural flavour, lemon peel. That is the whole label. The lemon peel gives you a little real citrus oil, but the flavour doing the heavy lifting is the one word on the box that explains nothing about itself. My verdict on this one is simple. It is a fine cup of green tea wearing a lemon costume, and you are paying extra for the costume. Do you check what natural flavour actually means before you buy? Or do you trust the word natural the way most of us were raised to? I used to trust it completely. I bought this exact brand for years before I understood that natural flavour can be built from dozens of individual aromatic compounds, all folded into one legal phrase, and none of them listed by name. That is not a trick unique to Lipton. It is standard across almost the entire flavoured tea aisle, and once you see it in one box, you cannot unsee it in the rest. Which brings me to the one that surprised me the most in this whole comparison, and it was not the one I expected going in. Bigelow is the other brand nearly every one of you named, and their plain English tea time black tea is about as honest as a label gets, which I will come back to later. But their French vanilla black tea is a different conversation entirely. Bigelow's own customer literature states plainly that several of their flavoured blends, including the French vanilla line, use natural vanilla flavour together with artificial vanilla flavour in the same bag, blended specifically to build a stronger vanilla taste than either one could produce alone. This is what the ingredient list shows, and to Bigelow's credit, they do not hide it. It says so right on the box and on their own website. The conclusion is plain enough on its own. A vanilla tea, reaching for both a natural and an artificial version of the same flavour, is a tea that could not get where it wanted to go using real vanilla alone. My verdict is not that Bigelow lied because they never claimed pure vanilla in the first place. My verdict is that the word vanilla on the front of a box does not mean what most of us assume it means, and that is worth knowing before you reach for it out of habit. I remember my mother keeping a tin of loose black tea and nothing else, no flavours, no blends, because that was what was affordable and available where we were. The first time I tasted a flavoured tea as an adult, I remember being almost suspicious of how much more it tasted like the fruit on the box than the tea itself ever could. That suspicion turned out to be the right instinct. It just took me years of reading labels to understand why. Bigelow's wellness lines deserve their own moment here because they are marketed on a different promise entirely. Their benefits line, with names built around calm, throat defense, and stress relief, leans hard on the idea that these are functional teas, doing something beyond flavor. Look at the actual blend behind one of these, something like a ginger and peach recipe, and you will find peppermint, wild orange leaves, chamomile, natural peach and ginger flavors with other natural flavors, more ginger, licorice root, fennel, marshmallow root, and dried peaches, stacked one after another. That is not a short list, and the phrase other natural flavors appears without ever specifying what those other flavors are. The plain language conclusion is that a tea marketed on function is still, underneath the marketing, a flavor blend first, and a wellness product second. My verdict is that the herbs inside are real and mostly recognizable, which is more than I can say for some boxes. But the wellness framing is doing a lot of the persuading that the ingredient list itself does not fully back up. Have you ever bought a tea specifically because the box promised calm, or immunity, or sleep? I have, more than once, and I want to be fair about something before I move past this. These wellness blends are not empty theatre. Chamomile, licorice root, and ginger are genuine traditional botanicals with a long history in home remedies, including in the kind of kitchen I grew up watching. The issue was never the herbs. The issue is a box that leans on a health promise while burying the actual composition behind a phrase like other natural flavours, leaving you to trust the front of the package instead of reading what is actually inside it. I think about my mother's approach to sickness, which was almost always a specific herb for a specific complaint. Ginger for a sour stomach. Chamomile for a restless night. Nothing blended into a single all-purpose cure. These modern wellness boxes borrow that same old logic and repackage it as a single-named product for a single-named mood. There is nothing dishonest about that repackaging on its own. But when the specific herb gets folded into a list of 11 or 12 ingredients, several of them labelled only as other natural flavours, you lose the ability to know which part of that box is actually doing the work your grandmother's single herb once did on its own. Celestial Seasonings built its entire identity on being the natural alternative to the big commercial names. And for their plain Sleepytime blend, that reputation holds up completely. Chamomile, spearmint, lemongrass, tilia flowers, blackberry leaves, orange blossoms, hawthorn, and rosebuds. 8 ingredients, every one of them a whole herb or flower, and not a single added flavour anywhere on that list. That is the whole label, and it is about as clean as a flavoured aisle product gets. I will hold that thought for the recommended list later because it earns its place there without qualification. But the moment Celestial Seasonings adds a flavour variant, the picture shifts the same way it does everywhere else in this comparison. Their Sleepytime vanilla blend keeps most of the original herb base: chamomile, spearmint, lemongrass, blackberry leaves, tilia flowers and rosebuds, but adds natural vanilla flavour with other natural flavours into the mix. The conclusion follows the same pattern as the Lipton box did earlier. A brand can build its reputation on being the clean, natural option, and still reach for the same undefined flavour phrase the moment it wants to sell a vanilla version. My verdict is that the base blend deserves the trust it has earned, but the flavoured line does not automatically inherit that same level of transparency just because the company's name is on the box. That is where 4 brands stand so far, and I have not even reached the one recommendation on this shelf that genuinely surprised me by how simple it turned out to be. If you have made it this far, you already care more about what is in your cup than most people standing in that aisle ever will. I do not read labels because a channel told me to. I read them because I learned, a long time ago, that the front of a box is written by a marketing department and the back is written by a legal department. And only one of those two is required to tell the truth completely. If that sounds like the way you already think about food, this is a channel built entirely around that habit. One box at a time. Before the recommended list, I want to be honest about the limits of everything I just told you. Ingredient lists change. Companies reformulate a recipe without changing the box art for months, sometimes longer. And a flavour supplier can be swapped out entirely without a single word on the packaging telling you it happened. What I read on these labels this week may not match exactly what sits on a shelf near you 6 months from now, or in a different region of the country, since distribution and formulation can vary by market and even by country of manufacture. This is not a reason to ignore what I found. It is a reason to check your own box the next time you buy, rather than relying on a video from someone standing in her own kitchen 1,000 miles away. I would rather you distrust my memory of a label than trust a label you never actually read yourself. Now for the 4 teas I would actually recommend, starting with the plainest one on this entire list. Bigelow English Tea Time lists exactly 1 ingredient: black tea. Nothing added, nothing to interpret, nothing hiding behind a phrase like natural flavour. It will never trend on anyone's wellness list because it does not promise anything beyond being tea. And that is precisely why it earns a place in my pantry. Twinings Earl Grey comes next, and it is not a 0-ingredient tea, but it is an honest one. Black tea, natural flavour, and bergamot peel. 3 ingredients, and the bergamot peel sitting right there in the list means the citrus note is not resting entirely on an undefined flavour phrase the way the Lipton lemon tea was earlier. This is a flavoured tea that still shows its work, and it is the closest thing on this whole shelf to proof that a flavoured tea does not have to hide behind a single, vague word to taste distinctive. Do you look for the actual named fruit or spice on a flavoured label? Or do you let the word natural flavour satisfy you, the way it satisfied me for years? Celestial Seasonings' original Sleepytime earns its spot here exactly the way I said it would. 8 named herbs and flowers, no added flavour of any kind, and a reputation that actually matches what is printed on the box. If you want a caffeine-free evening tea, and you want to know exactly what you are drinking, without translating a single phrase, this is the one I would hand you first. And Lipton's plain black tea, the version without a fruit or a flavour promised anywhere on the front, keeps the same simplicity Bigelow's English Tea Time does. 1 ingredient, 1 tea leaf, no costume required. It is proof that even a brand with plenty of flavoured lines worth questioning still makes a version worth keeping in the cupboard. The larger principle here has nothing to do with any one company being good or bad. It is this: the shorter and more specific an ingredient list is, the less you have to trust a phrase you cannot define. The moment a label reaches for words like natural flavour, other natural flavours, or a wellness claim without naming what is behind it, that is your cue to slow down and ask what you are actually paying the extra dollar for. A short label is not automatically a virtue, and a long one is not automatically a fault. But a label that hides its most important word behind a phrase built to be legally sufficient rather than actually informative deserves your attention every single time you see it, on a tea box or anywhere else on that shelf. Here is your homework before the next video. Go turn over whichever one of these 4 brands is already sitting in your own kitchen right now. Read the ingredient list out loud the way I just did, and tell me in the comments exactly what you find, word for word. I want to know if your box matches what I found on mine. So here is how those 2 open loops close. That specific number from the opening, the 4 ingredients on the Lipton lemon box, turned out to be the smallest ingredient count of any flavoured tea in this whole comparison, and still the one doing the least explaining of itself. And the tea that earned the permanent spot in my cupboard, the one I promised you at the very start, was the plainest box on this entire shelf. Bigelow English Tea Time. 1 ingredient, nothing to translate. I have not bought a flavoured tea without turning the box over first, since I learned what these labels actually say. And I do not plan to start again.